try to put together programs like this on occasion, and at the invitation of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, we were invited to do a series of workshops this week with multiple law enforcement agencies in Malaysia, focusing on internal affairs. Police agencies dealing with corruption from within their own agencies. And so we've done we've done 2 workshops this week. One that was with multiple agencies: Royal Malaysian Police, Royal Malaysian Customs, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, and others involved in internal affairs type work. And we brought in 3 experts to deal with these issues. Peter Ainsworth is a senior prosecutor from our Department of Justice in our Public Integrity section. And so his job is to deal with public corruption of all types across the board in terms of agencies, not just police agencies, although he has prosecuted a number of both federal and local police agencies. He's prosecuted DEA agents on the federal side. He's prosecuted local police on the local side. And then Chief Charles Campese, who is, of course, the former head of the NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau, and you've already heard his credentials explained before. But we also brought 2 senior agents from the Drug Enforcement Administration who work for the Office of Professional Responsibility. And so part of the dialogue this week has been talking not just about what New York did to clean up its police department, not only what our Department of Justice does to prosecute police officers, but also what the Drug Enforcement Agency Administration in the United States does to put good policies and procedures in place to minimize the opportunity for corruption. And so the Office of Professional Responsibility within the DEA has very strict policies and procedures in terms of how drugs are handled, how money is handled, to just minimize opportunities and temptations for police officers to engage in misconduct. So that generally is what we've been doing. We had 2 workshops this week, and then yesterday we also spoke to the police college, the R&P Police College in Cheras, and spoke to senior officers there about this topic. Well, let me turn it over to our U.S. experts in terms of, I'll let them explain what kind of response we had. But there's been senior officers from each of the agencies, very senior officers, the head of internal affairs at various law enforcement agencies. So we had a good response in terms of the rank of people that participated in the meetings, and I'll let these guys explain how the workshop was received.
Sure. My impression was that everyone, it was quite a business-like group, and everyone focused on, not on the philosophical, I will say, that focused on the practical side of how we can enhance the tools that are used to fight corruption, and to perhaps consider some new techniques, some new ideas, and that's what the spirit of these types of gatherings are. Our goals are the same in our various countries in the law enforcement community. Question is, how do we reach those goals? And so it was a very business-like discussion about that, talking about some of the techniques that we've employed and talking about the Malaysian experience as well.
Well, I'll simply say that as we held the workshops this week, we find that the challenges that the MACC faces are the same challenges we face in the United States, and these are not easy crimes to investigate. Corruption is always a transaction that both parties are satisfied with, and so they're not volunteering to come forward to cooperate. And so this week has been all about just internationally what are becoming recognized as best practices to tackle corruption. And so we've been focusing on of those tools that are available. And Peter sits on the board of the IAACA, International Association of Anti-Corruption Enforcement Authorities. And what are some of the tools that are being used worldwide? Not just the U.S. We're not at all proposing U.S. solutions, because you can look at U.S. news web pages today, and you'll see that there's corruption still occurring in our police departments. It's all about us coming together and recognizing best practice to try to deal with it from within police agencies. And so I thought there was really vigorous, good discussion all week long, and interest in these tools, and frank discussions as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only here for a week. I'm not going to give you my view because it's not going to be an objective one necessarily. I will tell you that I go to a lot of countries, and that as part of my job, we discuss the same topics. Compared certainly to some, this has been a very serious and a very thoughtful discussion here. So to the extent that I can infer a seriousness that certainly was present this week.
Well, let me focus, give my quick observation. The message this week has been one that can be pretty easily encapsulated in what Chief Campisi's presentation has been over and over again. And it's not really telling anyone else how to do anything. It's simply sharing our experiences. And Chief Campisi, if you want to summarize just briefly, what has your message been with respect to lessons learned in New York?
What we tried to explain is that the problems that are being faced here in Malaysia are problems that are faced around the world. We come up with a series of proactive investigative techniques that we found to be very helpful. And the message is that corruption is a very important part of policing. And if corruption exists, policing is hampered and it is not done well. And that officers have to be aware that corruption is something that needs to be combated at each level of the organization. That from the top of the organization all the way to the officers on the street, there has to be an awareness of corruption and an awareness of the methods of preventing and investigating corruption when it occurs. Now, the methods that we have employed in New York and in the United States are methods that can be adapted, and I was very encouraged by the questions that I received from the people, both in the forums and after the forum, asking about details and asking about ways that they can adapt these to Malaysian law and Malaysian practices. And I saw a concentrated effort to understand and to hopefully bring back some of the methods that we're using. They're going to adapt them, and I come away very encouraged.
May I ask, so could you explain for us, in terms of your, what were the distinctives, what are the distinctives of the Internal Affairs Bureau in New York in terms of your approach to dealing with corruption? Because if you would, you might describe how were things back in the early 1990s in New York?
The New York City Police Department, like many big city police departments in the United States and around the world, experienced their own corruption problems. And commissions were formed, blue ribbon panels were brought together to try to discuss the problem and find solutions. And we found that being a reactive agency was good but not good enough. So we decided that in order to do corruption control and corruption investigations as well as they can be done, that we needed to become proactive. And we employed a variety of proactive measures to try to get out in front of corruption. You know, we believe that the culture of an agency is molded from within. And if the internal part of the agency wants to change and wants to change their culture, they're in the best position to do it. Sometimes they need help, sometimes they need encouragement. But if they have the determination, and the determination from the top, they can do it. Now, you can't expect this to change overnight, because social science research tells us that cultures and organizations can take as much as 5 years before they change. But if there is a willingness to change, if there is a commitment to change, then departments can do it. They need to start and work hard from within. It's something that is best succeeded if they have full commitment from the top and they work hard. But it also helps to have encouragement and to have some outside oversight, just to help and make sure that they're doing it the correct way. again, we're here for a very short period of time, and in our conversations, there is certainly a dedication to fight corruption. Again, it's a process, and that process can be as quick or as slow as the commitment from the people who are inside and outside of the agency.
You know, I think one of the points that have been made that have been a big part of the presentations this week is that whether it's an Internal Affairs Bureau, whether it's an Office of Professional Responsibility, an entity within the law enforcement agency needs to be proactive and not just reactive to corruption. And that's been kind of the recurring theme this week, is to be proactive. And there's a number of ways that the NYPD has done it, a number of ways that our Federal Drug Enforcement Administration has done it. But that's been kind of a recurring theme. We're not, you know, I mean, I think, again, these guys are just here for a few days, and they're just sharing their perspective.
Well, we haven't done an analysis, a complete in-depth analysis of each of the agencies. What we've done is we've heard some of their concerns and some of their issues, and we've presented what we believe to be the ways that we have combated corruption. So our purpose here in this short period of time is to exchange ideas, to open dialogue, to start discussions, to get people thinking about alternative ways to combating corruption.
So you have to understand that these are actually, they're law enforcement terms that have meanings. It's not just a philosophical discussion. Reactive means that you sit in your office and you wait for complaints, and then you go and you investigate the historical incidents that is being reported to you, as opposed to proactive, which is going out and finding the crime and collecting the evidence as the crime occurs at times. Beyond that, you can use your imagination about what the techniques are and what have you.
Well, you're right in the aspect that we in New York City, we try to use every resource available. We encourage the public to be involved. We attend public meetings. We explain to them the rules and procedures. They understand what should be expected. We let them know the ways they could report corruption. We make it as easy as possible for them to report corruption. And we try to engage the citizens as much as we can. Again, being here only a week, I can't tell you how well that the Malaysian police are using social media or how they're engaging public. That was not our purpose to do that in-depth analysis. Well, the New York City Police Department has almost 50,000 employees, and our Internal Affairs Bureau at current is about 750 people. That's a round figure. And what we believe is a good rule of thumb is you need about 1.5% of your resources dedicated to integrity and discipline and administrative procedures and fighting corruption. Well, the biggest fight is we put a new agency together, the Internal Affairs Bureau. And when you're putting a new agency in place, you're fighting some of the people who like the old agency, and you're trying to establish new policies and procedures. And in the initial stages, it's the same thing with any organization. It's staffing. You need to put the most qualified, the most talented people in place. You have to secure, you have to plan correctly. You have to secure budgeting and funding. So, I guess the biggest thing is your staff. You have to put people in place that are committed and will serve you best and have the most talents and abilities. The New York City Police Department is dedicated to helping and working with other law enforcement agencies throughout the world. We believe that by sharing information and sharing resources that we all can accomplish our mission the best.